Sandra Lopez is the Wearable and Fashion Business Development Director for Intel. Sandra Lopez joined Intel in 2005 as a marketing manager. Leveraging her vast and proven marketing experience within the technology sector, she quickly began to transform marketing within Intel. She drove Intel's consumer marketing strategy. She helped launch Intel's first smartphone and Android tablets. Currently, she drives Intel's wearable business marketing strategy in fashion. She told me a little bit about that. It's very, very interesting. And she has been the recipient of many industry recognitions. Sandra brings over 17 years of experience in marketing within the technology and fashion sector. So please join me in welcoming Sandra Lopez of Intel.
Thank you, Gail, for the introduction. Buenas tardes and good evening. I'm happy to be here. When I was first asked to do the keynote, I didn't hesitate to say yes because I'm very passionate about empowering diversity as well as embracing the Latino community. But after quickly stating yes, I stepped back and I realized to myself, by the mere act of you guys being here, you too embrace the Latino community and understand the importance of embracing the Latino community. I'm sure many of you in this room are very familiar with the following stats that I would like to share with you tonight. First, today we represent 16.7% of the US population, and by 2050, 30%. Next year, we represent $1.5 trillion in purchasing power. Quite frankly, we're the average age of 28, making us 10 years younger than the average US citizen. And a stat, quite frankly, that I'm extremely proud of is 69% of high school graduates enroll in college. The other thing for businesses is important to realize that 31% of Hispanics versus 14% non-Hispanics are likely to try new products. And in my industry of technology, we are the first adopters of mobile tech. In addition to these statistics, you probably realize, and you've probably seen lots of research reports out there stating that a diverse boardroom leads to higher business profitability. I know, and I think you know, given all the speeches that I've seen, that we play a critical role in society. The numbers that I've shared with you today, and they're just a couple of numbers, make the Latino the most influential voice in pop culture, business, and in politics. Quite frankly, we are defining the brands of today and those of tomorrow. So I don't think I need to convince you of the importance of the Latino community and the importance of embracing them and helping them out. So I went back to the meeting organizers and I asked, well, what can I share with you tonight? And they advised me, share your personal story. While most keynotes, I spend the time talking about marketing, wearable technology, and for that matter, the importance of understanding the next generation, which we call millennials. I'm going to share, in the first time in a public forum, my personal story. I promise I won't cry. Ultimately, life-defining moments define you and your purpose in life. And what I often like to call it, your personal brand. It's not unlike consumer brands that spend over $33 billion in understanding, communicating, and nurturing their brand. Now, I'm not asking you to invest monetarily. I am asking you to take a step back and understand your life-defining moments that ultimately is defining you and your personal brand. People often ask me, well, how do I define my personal brand? And quite simply, it's answering your question, why? Mark Twain once stated, there are two most important things that will happen in your life: the day you were born and the day you find out why. Over the past 5 years of my life, I began to uncover my why, and my why was not defined in a moment of time or a particular phase in my life, but over 41 years of my life. They asked me to tell you a story, and unfortunately, I don't have a story. I have a series of stories that informed my why. First, duality is an asset. I was born in the United States from a Mexican migrant family, making me first-generation American or Mexican American. I just recently found myself Googling on research and I was Googling, I just found myself looking at, well, what does it mean to be a Mexican American? And I found this. Being Mexican American is exhausting. Being Mexican American is tough. And being a Mexican American is hard. And I actually chuckled just like you because quite frankly, it embodied my adolescence. Growing up, it was my childhood sentiment. See, when I was growing up, for my American friends, I wasn't American enough. And guess what? When I went to go to Mexico, I wasn't Mexican enough for my Mexican family. My parents understood the importance of having a good education. They enrolled my siblings, my 2 sisters and my brother, in a private Catholic school. And we lived in an upper middle class neighborhood. There was less than 1% minority. And my colleagues would often wonder, how could somebody as light of skin as I am be Mexican? But surely with the surname Lopez, I could possibly be Mexican. Now, the other question would be, is we were fortunate enough to live in an upper middle class neighborhood, so they naturally assumed that my father was a white collar worker. He wasn't. And if he wasn't a white collar worker, you know what they thought he was? A successful gardener or field worker. He wasn't. He was actually a horse jockey. My father's occupation was so different. And then my parents being Mexican Catholic, and I had to be home at 9 o'clock at night, and everybody had to be home at 11 o'clock at night, just made me an outlier at school. So that happened here in the United States. And then every summer, we would go to Mexico, and we would visit a little town named San Miguel el Alto, Jalisco, 2 hours away from Guadalajara. Woo! And in my bag, I would pack my American fashion and my Spanglish. And it was enough to be, quite frankly, gringatons. My cousins would laugh at me. My grandmother would tell me, mija, tú no eres mexicana. You're American. So I wasn't a Mexican enough for them. And so at the end of the day, several years, I struggled with my own identity. You would find me calling myself, today I'm Sandy, tomorrow I'm Sandra, the next day I'm Sandy, and the next day I'm Sandra. Quite frankly, I would try to be more American than my American friends and more Mexican than my Mexican family. It was, however, my mother's wisdom that I soon realized that it was never about this or. I kept finding, it's like, am I Mexican or American? It was about an and. And she would tell me this verbatim. Mija, tienes un regalo. You are Mexican and American. You speak English and Spanish. You live in one of the best places in the world where you can get the best education. It's called United States of America. And you get to go visit some of the most amazing beaches in the world. It's called Mexico. And she would go on to say, and she'll tell me, you get to eat chilaquiles and hamburgers. So it was then that I began to embrace my duality, my mother tongue Spanish, and the benefits of living in America and traveling to Mexico. Today, my mother was right. She told me it was always going to be an asset, and I finally realized that it was 17 years later that I started to realize that I actually covet a trait like many of you in this room tonight. I am bicultural, trilingual, and know and understand what it means to be a Latino in the United States. I understand that $1.5 trillion consumer. Oftentimes, people think that it's about translating English to Spanish. There's this thing called Spanglish in which most Latinos do when they start to Google. My next story is about Si se puede. When I was in 5th and 6th grade, I wanted to play sports, not just any sports, American sports, and not just any American sport. Basketball. 4 feet 7 inches, the shortest person in the class. I haven't grown much since then. I was determined to play basketball, and everybody would tell me, no, you can't. But what nobody realized is that in the Lopez DNA, it's si se puede. So, at the mere age of 7, my father was a teniente racing against Mexican generals. Despite his age and all of those advising him that he would not succeed, he leveraged his passion for horse racing and his responsibility to put food on the table for 20. I was going to show a picture of my father doing that. You'll get it up there eventually. There you go. He came from a impoverished family, and arguably he never had a mother and father because he was the mother and father of 20. A vagabond traveling through all unknown parts of Mexico, and a large contingency telling him, no, you can't. He went on to become an accomplished writer in the 1970s and 80s and setting industry records. Despite his success at a very young age, my father would be challenged again on September 9th, 2001, almost 13 years ago. At 1:25 a.m., my father had a massive stroke. And doctors would tell us, and the nurses, that he would never be the same again. Quite frankly, he would never walk again. My father had the passion and determination to not only walk again, but to go back to work again. He not only is a horse trainer, he is a leading horse trainer in the Northern California. My father is a true embodiment of si se puede. So I go back to those people that told me, don't try out for basketball, and I asked myself, if my father at such a young age was able to succeed, I surely can try out for basketball. I did. I made it onto the team, and yeah, I wasn't very good. But it wasn't whether I was good or bad that actually mattered. It was this life lesson that I learned. To never allow what one may view as an impediment be your impediment. Turn it into an asset. And as my mother would always tell me, and she still tells me to the date, eres chiquita, pero perdosa. And as William Shakespeare tells us, is although she may be little, she is fierce. The other lesson I have learned is a little lesson called destiny. As I mentioned earlier, my parents valued education. It was too much my parents' surprise to learn that I wanted to be a fashion designer. They remember vividly when I would want to sew Barbie clothes and, quite frankly, attempt to sew my prom dress. And if I wasn't very good at basketball, I really, really wasn't good at designing. So they said, Mija, go look for a business degree or something else. So I took their advice. And I found a degree at the University of California, Davis. It was a Bachelor of Science of Textiles and Clothing. And they had 2 tracks, one in polymer science and the other one in marketing economics. I chose the latter. When going to school, I became passionate about the psychology of fashion and the macroeconomic variables and its impact in the fashion industry. Along the way, I uncovered a postgraduate degree in Italy. And there was and I wanted to attend, but yet there was one problem. It was only for 20 individuals, and you had to be of Italian citizenship. So the question for me would be, would my US citizenship be an impediment or an asset? I spent all day sitting down with the dean of the University of California, Davis, convincing her that having a diverse perspective will only help the program. I probably convinced her she just got tired of me going back to her office every day. But eventually, I was accepted, and a year later, I graduated from this postgraduate program. It became the foundation for me to enter into the world of fashion. I secured a job as a buyer. In the late 1990s, it was one of the most prominent jobs that you could have. Quickly after accepting the job, a couple months later, they asked me to attend and be participant of the executive and training track. So by the mere age of 25, I felt like I was a golden child. Executive and training, and I was making pretty good money, making more money than my friends, and I thought I was on the fast track. And then there was one day, one lunch, that my life would take a different turn. To the left side of me, it was a chief operating officer, and across the table was my colleague. The CEO leaned in and whispered in my ear, "You know, that person will be more successful than you." And I was confused by his statement, because I wasn't part of the executive and training track, but I remember my colleague excelled at math. And to be a successful buyer, you had to be really good at analytics. So I thought to myself, well, surely I'm gonna have to go to MBA school and enhance my mathematical skills. No, what he continued on to tell me was, there's a glass ceiling that exists. So I went home, got in my car that night, and I started crying. And it was like those days when I was confused if I was Mexican or American, but in this case, corporate America was defining my success based on my gender, a female. The very next day I went in, I resigned. It was actually a blessing in disguise, because in my backyard there was this magnetic energy called Silicon Valley. I left the fashion industry and joined tech. I was committed to making tech more fashionable from the marketing perspective, because if you evaluated the advertising at that time, it was just basically boring tech speak. I had the opportunity to work at both small and large companies that you may know of, Computer Associates, Macromedia, Adobe, and my current company that I've been at for over 8 years, Intel. These companies have provided me the opportunity to travel all over the world. I've had the opportunities to visit the rural areas of India, lived in Beijing, and I've had the opportunity to attend fashion shows like the ones in Milan. After 17 years later, my worlds have officially converged. I was determined to make tech more fashionable, and I stand here today as a director of wearables for the fashion industry. My sole purpose in this job is to converge two industries, tech and fashion, that arguably are oil and water. If it wasn't for me resigning that very next day and standing for what I believe should be a right, I don't know if I would be standing before you tonight. What I do know now is that, quite frankly, destiny will never find you. You find destiny. Now, earlier tonight, I heard in those videos commentaries around familia and respeto. These are traits that as Latinos we have and should embrace. Over the past 41 years of my life, I have learned that success is never achieved alone. It is who you choose to surround yourself with and how you treat them that will catapult you both personally and professionally. I was reminded of this just last year when I won the 2013 Marketers That Matter Award by the Wall Street Journal. While I was the recipient of receiving the award, there was no I in team. The award was a testament to the amazing supporting cast, and I just simply wrote the script. It has become a case study for many Fortune 500 companies. I get interviewed a lot about this particular program. And while I'm not going to bore you with the mechanics, when I'm often asked what made it successful, I simply state culture. There were two things. The team was able to respect and leverage over hundreds of individuals within the walls of Intel, their perspective and their ideas to enhance the program. In addition, we fostered a family-like atmosphere. We celebrated the successes and the failures. It has taken me years to learn, but I have learned over the years that to build a high-performing team, it takes a great leader. Any great leader can take a C team and turn them into an A team. And anybody that lacks leadership skills can take an A team and turn them to a C team. So I was talking about respect, though, and family. So what about the yin to my yang, which is family? I'm often asked about work-life balance. I don't have a work-life balance. I consciously choose to prioritize different elements of my life at a different time. But I am keenly aware of that I would not be here tonight if it wasn't for my husband, my amazing daughter, Miss Raquel, my sisters, my brothers, and my mother and father, and quite frankly, my endearing friends. They are my greatest cheerleaders and keep me going every day. It's been my life-defining moments that I have shared with you tonight that have really informed who I am as a person, both personally and professionally. As I was working on my keynote, I was actually referencing my Twitter bio, which I want to share with you tonight. I didn't realize when I was writing my bio that I was leveraging my life-defining moments subconsciously to articulate who I am. But I thought it was important to break it down for you. A proud member of the 5-2 Club. This is a testament and an homage to always turn an impediment into an asset. Lopez equals Latina. I'm a proud Mexican-American woman working in corporate America, and I'm committed to breaking the ceilings for not only my friends, my colleagues, but my daughter. The other two things that I'm highlighting is the fact that I'm my customer's #1 fan. I'm passionate about marketing, and I was passionate about converging both fashion and tech, and my goal is to always make wearables wantable. And the last statement on my Twitter bio was this, and it's probably the most important: empowering diversity. In everything I do, in all the teams that I build, I look around and I ensure diversity is represented. But I'm not just talking about age, ethnicity, and gender. I'm talking about perspectives and experiences. See, if all these research reports are telling you that better business results are delivered by diverse groups, I don't have to wait for a boardroom. I can start now, and I ensure that I do that in everything I do. See, these were my life-defining moments who have defined me as a person. And some of the great leaders that I want to show you have had their tremendous stories informing their North Stars. Cesar Chavez, or for that matter, the CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz. If you look at his business actions, they were directly informed by his life experiences. I'm often asked for advice professionally in terms of how do you get from point A to point B, or how do I get to my personal brand? And I think it's very simple, and I want to share this with you tonight. Always reflect on your character, your values, your passion, and what makes you unique. And most importantly, what makes you genius. There's a genius inside of all of us, and sometimes it's just waiting to shine. So I'd like to leave you tonight with a final slide advising you, adelante, go find your North Star. Thank you.